Well, hello YouTube. It's been a minute, but I think today I have an interesting one for you. The theme of our channel here is, well, we've got a couple themes going. We've got public art, we've got lenape history, and we've got sculptures. And yeah, I think in this video we can hit all three of those themes because I want to go check on a statue that I've seen all my life. Well, not all my life, but over the last 10 years or so. There's been a statue over here in a cemetery at one of these old churches, and it's on Pine Street. And I haven't seen it recently. I hope it's still there, but it's pretty interesting because, well, it's got a little silly background, this statue, and it's in an important cemetery next to a marker. I think there's like a historic marker about some Lenape chiefs that came to Philly. So let's go find this statue, and then we'll talk about the Lenape chiefs, learn what we can. All right, so maybe if you've been to Philly and you're walking around and you've walked around Old City, maybe you recognize sort of where I am in this video. I'm coming up on 6th and Pine. I'm on Pine Street. Now, Pine Street is one of the more historic parts of Philadelphia, obviously. I'm in Society Hill, that area, Washington Square West. And these neighborhoods are full of history, and so a lot of the early colonial era cemeteries and buildings and landmarks are all right around here. And one of those places here on Pine Street is the old Pines Presbyterian Church Cemetery. And the old Pine Street Cemetery by the Presbyterian Church is one of the oldest cemeteries in America. There are a lot of Revolutionary War heroes buried there, and a lot of other interesting people who are buried there. So, oh, look at this. I've never noticed this. Look at that. Look at that Star of David. I wonder what this building is. Wow. Yeah, it's hard not to walk around here and just get distracted by all of the amazing architecture, but we'll get to this cemetery and then we'll get back to you. Okay, we're coming up to the cemetery here. Let's see if the statue still exists. Oh man, I don't see it. The sculpture I'm looking for. It used to be right up against the fence here. Right up against this fence, there was a sculpture. Oh man, it's gone. Yeah, it's definitely gone. Huh. Here's the stump of the tree that the sculpture was made from. Shoot, it's gone. One thing I love about Philly is all the old cemeteries and the beautiful flags. And yeah, so many little interesting things to see here. When I was, over the last 10 years, this tree stump, if you can see it right there. There used to be a tree, right? Used to be a tree growing right there. And the story goes that the roots were coming up under the sidewalk and tearing it up. So they had to remove the tree. But of course, they didn't want to remove such an old tree that gave such ambiance to the cemetery. So You know, they wanted to do something with it, and a local artist, sculptor, decided to carve the stump of the tree into a statue of Jeffrey. Oh, I'm gonna not remember. I'm gonna get back to you with the name of the Reverend, but it was the original Reverend of this church. So they made a statue, and it was quite a controversial statue, and I'll tell you why in a sec. Looks like there's a little presentation on Washington's life and his relationship with the slaves that he held, that he owned. Yeah, they had Washington and his slaves had a very interesting and tough relationship, so that could be interesting. Look at how beautiful that is. That's a magnolia tree back there. I love magnolias. Look at the beautiful headstones. It's an incredible carving, man. Look at the beautiful trees. This is another magnolia. Look at all of these flags represent Revolutionary War soldiers who fought for freedom and gave their life for this country and what it is now. So, yeah. So I looked up the guy's name, George Duffield. And George Duffield was the minister at this church, right here. He was the minister at this church during the Revolutionary War. So he was very outspoken. He was an activist. He spoke out against taxation without representation, and he basically, gave sermons against the King George, and King George didn't like that. He didn't like that at all. So Reverend Duffield got a little bounty put on his head, and became famous. It's sort of, it's kind of a badge of honor, if you ask me, to get a bounty put on your head by the King of England during the Revolutionary War. That's pretty cool. So here's the stump. So here's the stump, and at some point about 10 years ago, this stump when it was about, I don't know, 10, 15 feet tall, kind of came up like this, and there was it had been carved to look like Reverend George Duffield, in honor of his standing up to the King of England and fostering the revolution. And look at that, you can kind of see their old grave markers stuck in the roots. Wonder whose graves these are, And I wonder what kind of tree this was. Stands to reason, if that's a magnolia, and that's a magnolia back there, I don't know, this is a monkey ball tree. I don't know what the actual name of the monkey ball trees are, but maybe you know what I'm talking about. And then, so maybe this was a magnolia tree too. I don't actually know. But yeah, you can see it's kind of placed. It grew up between the graves, and it was surrounding the gravestones and breaking the fence and going out into the sidewalk. So they had to remove it, just to preserve this general area of the graveyard, I guess. So but again, it was very controversial for one specific reason, and I'll put a photo right here so you can see what the statue looked like, and then maybe you can guess what the specific reason that it was controversial was. Okay, so you see the you see the statue, and of course from this angle in the cemetery, the statue looked completely fine. You know, maybe a little odd. You know, it's I always find, you know, cemeteries are full. It's full of stone, right? All these stone markers and beautiful trees, and then a wooden sculpture was a little odd. I'm not gonna lie. It didn't quite fit with the rest of the ambiance of this place, in my opinion, personally. But that being said, it was a very interesting sculpture, and from the street, it looked very phallic, and it got a lot of comments, and people thought it was unbecoming of such a historic place to have such a ginormous phallic symbol carved into the into a tree overlooking this cemetery, you know. So that's what it is. But I wanted to show you one thing they've done really nicely here, because, you know, this cemetery has a ton of graves, and the headstones have, you know, weathered away and been replaced. But look at this, the way they've arranged some of the old headstones in this brick wall. You know, so it starts over there with the shortest, and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger all the way up to there, and then back down again. Yeah. It's kind of an elegant way of, you know, if you have to build a wall, and there are graves probably right there, maybe that's a nice way to build the wall and keep, you know, it's a compromise. You keep the grave markers at least relatively close to the graves, or right on top of where they were, and get to have your wall. So I think this is a rec center. It's a community center where there are all sorts of activities. But this is, yeah, it's a good. I like that way of putting the headstones into the brick wall. Thought that was clever, and yeah. So. How did George Washington and his revolutionaries prevail over the mighty British Empire? Buried in Old Pines Graveyard is a small percentage of a much larger 18th century population that answers both questions. Yeah, they do a nice job. There are little markers like that throughout the graveyard with little bits of information. And you can just come right in. I mean, it's open to the public, and you can come right in and walk around. There's a whole nother section around the corner there. So yeah, I'd recommend it. So yeah, you know, the sculpture that this man carved, it was quite phallic, and it caused a lot of controversy, and people didn't really know what to say about it. It was very stunning. It was very shocking to be driving down Pine Street and then suddenly see that, you know. So now that it's gone, I think there's a bit more dignity restored to the cemetery, to be honest. But I understand why the sculptor made it that way. He probably didn't realize how it looked from the street side. So yeah. Yeah, so what are you gonna do, right? That's public art for you. And we've had this theme on this channel of art and unintended consequences of art, and, you know, sort of rogue artists. And I would say that was a heavily sanctioned piece of art that had an unintended public consequence that was quite funny. And sometimes that's what happens with public art. Art is something that you can't always control, right? And that's sort of the point in many ways. Whether, you know, whether it's graffiti or murals or a sculpture of a reverend that looks like a phallic symbol. you never know what you're gonna get with public art, and that's sometimes how it goes. So now it's gone, and all we have are its memories. So long live the phallic symbol of Pine Street. May it, you know, it had a good run for about 10 years, and I guess now it's no more. So R.I.P. All right, while we're here, I want to show you one of the coolest grave markers. I think it's pretty weird, pretty interesting. The writing is pretty faded away, so I don't actually know what it says, but look at this. It's like a pyramid. Yeah, pretty interesting, right? Look at that, the writing is completely faded away. But pretty strange. Random pyramid in the corner here. And I guess I should clarify, I'm no longer, I was over in the Presbyterian cemetery. That's the Old Pine Church. Old Pine Creek, Old Pine Street Cemetery. And now I walked across the street to the Episcopal Church. This is not St. Peter's. I get them all confused. You know, I was raised Catholic, so for me, the Presbyterians and the Episcopals and Lutherans and all the Protestants, I get them confused sometimes. But this is the Episcopal Church on Pine Street, and in this cemetery, other than the triangular pyramid-shaped headstone over there, that's quite interesting. There's another plaque here that I wanted to cover in this video. I actually, in my memory, I thought it was over by the sculpture, but I realized later I think there was a plaque over by the sculpture that's no longer there of the Reverend, but it's been moved to this cemetery, or maybe this is also another copy of the plaque. So here we are. I'll show you in a moment. Okay. Tribal chieftains. In January of 1793, a delegation of tribal chieftains from what are now Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan arrived in Philadelphia, the U.S. capital. The Indians had been invited by President George Washington to a peace council to resolve boundary disputes in the newly created Northwest Territory. No agreement was reached at this time, and war followed. The Indians were defeated at the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794. Yeah, so. And then here you can read about 8 of these chieftains. They died when they got here because of they got smallpox. I don't really know where their graves are, but at least we know that they were here, and some of their names, I've always thought are pretty fun, like Big Ig. Big Ig's a fun name. Wapatit. And I feel like these names should be well known. I think each of these chiefs should have their own monument, in my opinion. And here's a little rendition of the chiefs, and yeah, and that's sort of what Independence Hall looked like without the steeple. That the steeple has been replaced many times on Independence Hall, so there you go. And then this is, I don't know why he's got his sword out. Why does George Washington have a sword pointed? Silver peace medal. Doesn't look like a very peaceful medal to me, but in any case, yeah. So these chiefs, they came to Philly. They came to Philly to negotiate a peace And if you remember from our other videos, 1790s, that was already very late. There were very few, if any, Lenape Lenape tribes in this area. All of the Lenape were pretty much gone by the late 1700s, and after the Revolutionary War period, it just got, there were very few, if any, Lenape left by the 1790s, which is why all these tribal chiefs are from Illinois and Indiana and Ohio and farther out west, closer to the other border of Pennsylvania, the other side, because that's where the colonists had pushed all the natives out. They'd pushed them all out to the far. That was the frontier at that time. The frontier zone was sort of the Appalachian Mountains, Pittsburgh, and then the other side was the Ohio River Valley, which was very fertile, and the settlers from Erie up north, and then the English settlers pushing along through the Appalachians. They started encroaching on their land, on the land of. I don't think they were the Lenape out there. I think they were the Shawnee. Could be wrong. I don't think the Algonquin tribes had a presence out in Indiana, Ohio. I think those were the Shawnee, but I could be wrong. And so these tribes, I'm guessing, were smaller sub-tribes from the Shawnee and related Midwest tribes that came to Philly to try to, negotiate so that the settlers wouldn't keep encroaching on their land. And then, of course, the French and Indian War had happened, and there was a lot of leftover tension from that. And the Indians, these chiefs, were more or less unsuccessful in their attempt. Several of them died in this trip, so they never went back home. It was overall just a tragedy. But that's the story of colonialism around here. And thank you to whoever put this nice plaque here and preserved this history, so that at least we know that among these hundreds and hundreds of graves somewhere in this cemetery, there are 8 Lenape chiefs, or eight chiefs of the various tribes of the Midwest, not Lenape necessarily, but various tribes from Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, and such, who came here. And so the ancestors are here somewhere. And I don't see any birds. The only bird that I see at the moment is a bird on a big pedestal. It's this bird right there. And that's not a real bird, so we're not gonna say that the ancestors are watching in this video. But the ancestors are here, and they're buried in this cemetery. So yeah, I think it's important. I'm gonna keep walking, but I think it's just important that we recognize, even in a city like Philadelphia, in our midst, there are little echoes here and there of the ancients, if we know where to look. So, all right, hopefully that gives you a little something about Native history and art in public spaces. And it's a beautiful day. So I hope you got something out of this and enjoyed this walk. My name's Sean. This is my channel, Saul Good. And please like and subscribe. And we'll be doing more, maybe less frequent videos going forward, but we'll talk about that at the end of the month. I'll do a monthly update and sort of let you know what's going on, because I said I would be posting daily, and I haven't been doing that in the last 2 weeks or so. But don't worry, I'm all right, and I'll give you all a little update in the next one. So subscribe and comment if you know anything about the statue, or the statue that got cut down. What a strange little saga that was. But leave a comment if you have any stories about that statue. And if you know anything about the chiefs buried in that cemetery as well, please leave a comment. And so we can all learn together. All right, that's it. Take care. Hope you're all enjoying the spring weather, and go enjoy those magnolias and cherry trees while they're blooming. Yeah. All right.